Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is James and I'm continuing on with this Barnstormer build. So I'm pretty far along in the build right now, and I think I'm generally on my last kind of major step, which is to put all the control linkages in, connect the servos up to everything. And so I have all my junk out on the table. I'm at the point in my build where my table is getting really messy because I just have stuff everywhere and I'm not putting things back. So I just want to get this thing done. So kind of at that critical mass moment in the build. So anyhow, I'm going to try to, so really all I have to do now is put on the control linkages, control rods and such to the servos. I got to put the wheels on, and that's going to be just about it. You know, I'll have to pack the receiver and the battery in, and that'll be it until to the point to where I just have to do some final adjustments to make sure the control throws are good for the control surfaces, and check the balance and those type of things. But that'll come next. But this is going to be hopefully the last major step to get all this stuff kind of set up. So let's get started on this. All right, so you can see on my messy table here is I have sort of all my little linkages and things kind of laid out. I'm not going to use all this stuff. Some of this stuff was in my toolbox or my stash. So I'm just going to pick and choose the things that are going to work the best for me. So what I did offline is, or off video, is I started with the throttle servo. That's going to be the one that I start on, and I'm going to be using this control. I guess I'll call it a control rod, but really it's just a hard piece of wire like that piano wire. And I'm going to connect it to the throttle with a clevis, and then I'm going to connect it to the throttle servo with the clevis, and then I'm going to connect it to the actual throttle on the engine with these little kind of quick connects. But what I had to do was I actually had to make room for the rod to get to the servo. So I actually had to cut some portions out along the bulkheads. I had to drill the bulkhead here inside, and I had to drill out on the firewall. And I have some pictures of that. I don't know if I can see it right here or not. There's the one, and there's the one on the firewall. It's a little slot, and there's also one down inside here by the engine, by the tank. You can see it down there. And then I had to cut out a chunk of this bulkhead, because what's going to happen is if you look down on it, the servo is going to move kind of. The servo is not going to make it all the way through up to the edge of the fuselage. So the wire is actually going to kind of go through this bulkhead, kind of like right in this position. So I had to just basically cut a notch out. I just couldn't simply drill a hole. I started drilling a hole, as you can see, like I did in the other bulkheads, but it just wasn't working out. The servo arm is going to swing it kind of back and forth, and it's going to come out a little distance from the fuselage wall. So that's okay. I'll probably clean this up. It looks a little bit like little Frankenstein right now, but we'll fix that up. But I will just start by saying that the first thing you want to do is you want to have all your servos centered. And then once they're centered, that's going to be the starting point for the position of the servo arm. Now you always want the servo arm to be perpendicular with the direction of the control rod movement. And that way, if it's perpendicular or close to perpendicular, you'll get sort of an equal movement back and forth. So what you want to do is you want to set up your servos, get them centered, and then put your arms on, and then go from there. The big exception to that is going to be the throttle, because the throttle is going to start in the low position and work its way up, or just kind of go up like this. So the throttle, you're going to start obviously kind of back a little bit, and you push the throttle forward. It's going to do this. So you can also see, like I was talking about just a few minutes ago, is that the servo arm is going to swing kind of back and forth, but it's a little far away from the fuselage side. So the control rod is going to kind of come out here. So the next step to do on the throttle is, where's my line? I'm going to use this, and I'm going to use this long piece here, and I'm going to connect it with the clevis back here. But I'm going to have to sort of bend this thing to kind of come. It's going to have a few bends in it. It's going to bend around the tank. It's going to go through here along the side of the tank, and then it's going to come out in the firewall, and then connect to the servo arm. I'm sorry, not the servo arm, the carburetor arm right here, or the linkage. So you have to I'm gonna have to make a few bends to get that to work, maybe like a few dog legs or things like that to get things to sort of line up. Okay, so I went and I adjusted my control linkage going to the throttle. Now, because this is the throttle, There's not a lot of resistance, obviously, in that little control arm on the carburetor, and it's a short distance. So for this model, I can go ahead and just use a single piece of wire, like you see here, without like a outside tube or outside tubing to help support it. It's not going to have a lot of resistance, so this will work just fine. If you had a longer run and more resistance, then you'd probably want to support that wire with an outside tubing. But in this case, I think we'll be just fine. All right, so let me check my movement here. This will be with throttle basically on idle, and there's full throttle like that. Obviously, I had to do like a little dog leg in here to get it to come up to meet the that little slot along the side of the fuselage. I mean, along the side of the tank. And then there's the rod going along the side of the tank, and it goes out the firewall back in there. It's kind of hard to see. And then it comes out the firewall in from this little slot in here. And then it connects to the arm on the carburetor. And I just use this again. I use these Dubro Easy connectors. These are just snap-on easy connectors. They're very convenient to use and very clean. So there you go. I got it set up, the throttle, and let me check the adjustments. Okay, so there's the throttle movement right there. Now, if you look inside the throttle, inside the carburetor, I mean, you can see there's full open. That's full throttle right there. And then when I bring it back to idle, I have a little bit, kind of maybe a, I don't know, maybe a 1/16 of an inch open. I'll have to adjust it later. And then I have my throttle cut switch on my transmitter, which is like right here. So my throttle cut switch should pull that all the way back down to completely close it up. There it goes. Very simple. So I just had to make adjustments on my transmitter and some of the linkages to get everything to work correctly. Alright, so that's about all I can do right now for the throttle. This is basically roughly set up with my with the throws and the linkages. And what I'll do is once I get the engine running again and fine-tune it before flight, I'll go through and make sure everything's working okay, that my idle is set right and everything else. And I'll probably have to make some adjustments. That's usually the case. Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and start setting up the elevator and the rudder. And one thing I wanted to note is, if you notice that here's my there's the servo arm for the throttle. And Futaba, you know, they come with these different servo arm setups. And typically what I do, I think a lot of people do, is you just cut off the arms that you're not going to use. So I find the one that I can fit that's going to be the most perpendicular to my movement, like I mentioned before. And then I go ahead and I cut off the other arms. And that's what I did with these right here. I just use like a little pair, like a snip. I'm using this little snip right here to do it. I just cut them off, or you can use an X-Acto. Just got to be careful. So I cut those off, and then maybe I'll sand them just to kind of round them out. But let me do that right now and finish these up. Okay, so let's take a look at these control rods. So again, I'm going to use these Sullivan Gold-n-Rod control rod set. And what it does is it has an outer rod. Let me get this for you. It has an outer rod and then the inner rod. So the outer rod is basically like a conduit that this one slides into, and the outer rod will be secured somehow to the fuselage. You'd probably use an epoxy. Okay, so these control rods are actually pretty long, and I'm going to have to cut them to fit. So the way I'm going to do this though is, so there's my servos. So this one's going to be my rudder servo. This one's going to be my elevator servo. But I'm going to have them cross. So I'm going to have my rudder servo come through. Oops, let me step back a little bit. It's going to go through like this, and it's going to connect to the rudder on the right side of the plane. And then I'm going to cut another piece, and it's going to be for the elevator. And I'm going to cross over from the elevator servo to connect to the elevator on the left side of the plane. And the reason I'm going to cross those is, it's not essential, but I'm going to cross them just so they have more of a straight run between the servo and the control horn. There'll probably be a little bit of bend in them, but I can just kind of minimize the bend by doing that. The other way to do it would be to come straight back like this, but typically, because it's coming out of the fuselage back here, it's going to have it'll come if I can demonstrate this, it's going to go straight. It would go straight in, and then because it comes out of the fuselage, it would end up bending out here. So I'm going to try to just minimize that by doing like this cross method like this, and this should work pretty good. So the way to do this is I'll cut my pieces. I'll hook up my, just for a temporary, I'll hook up the servos with them, and then that'll give me the alignment coming through here, and then I'll connect the control horns to the rudder and to the elevator. This way I can just kind of get these, once these get set in here like this, they'll come out at a certain angle, and then based on that I'll set the control horn onto that at that point. I don't want to connect the control horn first and then have to sort of get it to fit. I'd rather just kind of work my way backward, and that works out pretty good like that. Alright, so the Sullivan set comes with a little hardware package, and it has, I guess it has these little metal clevises in here, and a couple little thread rod, and a few other little doodads, and we'll pull this stuff out and start taking a look at it. Okay, so I went ahead and I opened up the slots on the rear part of the fuselage to accommodate the control rods, and then I used the inner rod to fish it through to the front up here to where the servos are. So this is the first one. This is going to be the elevator one, and you can look back here. So it kind of angles off to the left side of the airplane to where it's going to connect with the elevator right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and trim this off right now. I'm just going to use my little clippers, and I'm just going to do it roughly. I'm about right here. If I can get on here without, here we go. Pull those off of there. So there's that. And now I can go ahead and put my then what I'll do now is I'll go ahead and set the outer, basically the conduit, the blue tubing. I'll set that in. So I'll do this for both sides, and I'll get these roughly placed in here, and then I can connect the clevises and connect to the control horns on, and so on and so forth. Alright, well, by using the inner rods, they're more flexible, and I was able to kind of make the curves and kind of fish it through here. So now I have both of the inner rods in, and those are going to help me now, because I'm going to cut the outer rod, or basically the conduit pieces, these blue pieces, and I'll cut these, I'll fish these through over the yellow rods, and then I'll just cut them back to the right length, and then we can attach them with epoxy. Alright, so let me see here. I'll pull this one out. I got it marked, I think. Pull that out of there. Now I'm using these Sullivan control rods, and there's other ways to do this, right? So I always recommend check out your kit instructions and such. This kit actually called for using like hardwood, just basically hardwood pieces, you know, and then to attach like piano wire onto those and do it that way. There's other ways. I think you can get like carbon fiber control rods and so on and so forth. So just you have to just kind of figure out what's best for you. These control rods tend to be a little bit flexible. Well, they are flexible, and for some applications they're not the best. But since I have a pretty short run here, I'm not too worried about there being too much flexibility in these, and I think it's going to work out fine for this plane. You know, again, this is a 25 size or 25 class airplane. This isn't a 40 size. It's not a 60 size. So once you get up to those bigger scales or those bigger classes, you may not want to use something like this for all applications. But for this case, it's not a bad idea. So here's my first one that I cut and put it back in here. And I'll just hold this. All right, it'll come through like that. There we go. So there it is in there. Hope you can kind of maybe see it back inside. Maybe not. Back inside there. Back in there. And now I'll do the same for this other side. I'll fish it through from the back. And I'll go right about here on that one. So somewhere like that, if you can see in there, hopefully. Kind of hard, since it's getting to the point where it's hard to kind of show all this stuff, some of these small details. All right, so let me go ahead and mark this one. I'm gonna do about the same spot, about right here. And I'll pull that out and cut this one. Boink. Oh man, I pulled out my, now I gotta fish this back through. Oh well. Let me cut this one. Oh, my table's getting very, very messy. Right about here. Boom. All right. Okay. All right. So let me put these back in. Okay. So I have the rods, control rods, set up inside the fuselage. You kind of see here, back here. They cross over, like I mentioned before. So now I'm going to epoxy. I'm going to put some epoxy back here, and then I'm also going to do a little, sort of like a little mini bulkhead. I'm going to use this piece of plywood, and I'm going to put 2 holes in it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back like this, and I'm going to glue it up against the bulkhead here. And this is going to slide over the outer tubing like this. And then the kit actually comes with this little rubber, this piece of rubber. It's like grommet that you can cut, and that'll sort of sandwich. I'll show you what it's going to do, but it's basically going to sandwich on both sides of the plywood. The grommet's going to go on both sides along the control rod, and that's going to hold it here, and that's going to help just kind of keep it in place. So it'll be glued here, and it'll be glued up in here to keep things sort of stiff. Okay, actually, before I glue on the blue conduit pieces, I'm going to go ahead and attach the hardware and the clevises to the servos, and kind of take a look and see how things are kind of working before I glue anything in. So here's the hardware for the kit that came with the Sullivan kit. So they give you these clevises. These are like these metal ones. These are pretty good. That's this guy right here. And then they have these little threaded rod. I think this is 440. The threaded rod goes into the clevis, and then that goes into the yellow inside tubing, inside rod. And then on the outside, of course, like I mentioned, you cut these little. You can cut this. This is some rubber tubing they give you, and this is the cut into the small pieces to sort of act as the retainers. So I'm going to go ahead and put these onto the control rods, and then we'll go from there. All right, so I threaded about maybe 3/8 of an inch into the rod, and then I screwed on the clevis onto the threaded rod, and this is kind of loose, as you can see here. So what I'm going to do is, once I get it kind of set up where I want it to be, I'm going to put some thread lock on there, and I'll probably crimp this down a little bit to help hold it, but that should be okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and put these in here, and we can start setting up the connections. All right, so hopefully you can kind of see in here. So I got this trial run set up for the clevises are connected right here. And then you notice I got this piece of plywood that I just placed in here right up against the back of this bulkhead. And I put it right over those control rods, only as a way to kind of mark where they are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark these, and I'm going to cut out a couple kind of like U-shaped grooves or U-shaped slots into that piece of plywood. And then I'll slide that down on top of the blue control rod outer tubing, and then that's what I'm going to use to secure it to the bulkhead in this area. All right, so what I did here is I marked a location of where I think they are, and then I used a piece of my other tubing just to use it as a guide to show the width of it. So I'll cut this out, and like I said, I'll put this on here, and it'll make sense once it's all done. So let me do that. Okay, so there's my little piece that I cut. And then this is going to go over the control rod like that. And then let me show you what it's going to do with the grommet to hold it. Okay, so that's how it's going to work right there. So this is going to be, like I said, in the plane. But you just cut these little pieces of black tubing that they give you. Oops. And then you use those as just basically retainers. So you can either drill a hole through the bulkhead, or I just kind of did a slot. I don't think this has to be super strong, but I just do want to hold it in place. I may even put a little bit of epoxy, but I don't know, but this should probably be okay. Okay, well there's the little bulkhead attachment there. I epoxied it on. I'm using those little grommets, like I said, to kind of hold it, retain it. So it's going to be pretty bomber in there. I don't think it's going to have any problem with that. And then I have my servos kind of still continuing on with the servo connections. And now I did put a little bit of epoxy kind of back in here where the control rod's coming out. And then when I get sort of finished up, I'm going to cover part of this up with just some more Monocoat to kind of cover that opening a little bit. I do have to make some changes a little bit to the way the connecting rods are coming out of the back. I'm gonna have to make some minor adjustments, but I'll do that in the next step. But we should be able to go ahead and put the control horns on next and sort of get this thing kind of getting closer to getting finished.